Rule 3 is a very, very important rule. It's one that you really kind of need to memorize, unfortunately, for passing the test. So go ahead and read that rule kind of nice and carefully. If you need to pause the video and go ahead and do that, that's fine. But as we look at the rule, a couple of things we need to note is that there's a few differences between inland and international, and then also there's a couple of key definitions that we need to discuss before we move on so that you understand them. So first thing I'd say is as you read these rules, right, a lot of them are common sense, for instance, length and breadth of a vessel, for instance. But here's a couple that I specifically want to talk about. Vessel is anything that can carry, people or cargo, be used for transport over the water. So let's take a look at just a couple of random pictures I found from the internet. Are these vessels? Yes, these are all vessels because they can carry, they can be used for transport over water. Kayaks, canoes, weird rafts, those are all vessels. The next one that's important is power-driven vessel. I abbreviate that as PDV. You'll see that later in the rules as a power-driven vessel. It's one that's being propelled by machinery. So a common thing that people get wrong is if you own a sailboat like this one, and you decide that you take that sailboat out onto the bay, you put your sails up, but you're still using your engine, you are a power-driven vessel. You can be a sailboat, but not a sailing vessel. So a sailing vessel is one that's being propelled by sails, and if it has an engine, it's not being used. Can you run your engine to charge the batteries? Yes, you can. It can't be engaged if you want to claim privilege as a sailing vessel, though. So power-driven vessels, those propelled by machinery. Sailing vessels, those propelled by sails, and if it has an engine, it's not being used for propulsion. Another tricky one is vessels engaged in fishing. Similar to the sailing vessel rule, you may have a fishing boat or a sport fishing boat that you take out, and you may go fishing, but you're only a vessel engaged in fishing if it restricts your maneuverability because you're putting lines, nets, warps, and trawls over the side, right? So a key thing here is trolling versus trawling. So the first word is trolling. Let me write that a little better, sorry. Trolling. Right, this is just your typical sport fishing boat that's got a line out the back, even a couple lines out the back, even 5 or 6 lines out the back. It doesn't severely restrict its maneuverability, though. The other word is trawling. Trawling, spelled different. Your accent may make them sound the same, but trawling and trolling are different. Trawling is dragging a big net through the water and scooping up all kinds of fish and sea creatures behind you. So there's a key difference between trawling and trolling. And trawling is a vessel engaged in fishing. Trolling is a power-driven vessel, and that's going to be important later when we talk about responsibilities between vessels. Another key definition is these two here. Vessels restricted in their ability to maneuver, or VRAM vessels, and vessels not under command, or NUC vessels, NUC vessels, right? People often get these confused. And right now what you need to do is memorize one important thing. If you hear vessel restricted in ability to maneuver, or VRAM, you need to think nature of her work. So VRAM is nature of her work. Coast Guard buoy tenders, aircraft carriers launching aircraft, vessels that are, laying cable on the bottom or doing scientific survey work, mine clearing vessels sometimes, fishing vessels sometimes, towing vessels sometimes could be restricted in their ability to maneuver, right? So it's through the nature of her work, cannot comply with the rules completely. Conversely, a not under command vessel, or a NUC vessel, is one that through some exceptional circumstance cannot comply with the rules, right? So not under command, your brain should go to exceptional circumstance. So a lost or locked rudder, an engine that's out of control, those kind of situations might be a vessel that's not under command. You'll often hear a memory aid that says, for the type of lights that these vessels are supposed to show, red over red, the captain is dead. It doesn't necessarily mean that the crew is dead or damaged or the vessel is not under control, but it's not under command because some exceptional circumstance means that she can't navigate according to the rules. So these two are very important. A lot of questions are going to have them both as answers, and if you don't understand the difference, you'll be in some trouble. A couple of other key definitions: vessels that are inside of each other, they can actually see each other. So that doesn't mean radar. It means you can look out the window and you can see another vessel. And then finally, underway. Underway vessels are those that are not aground, made fast to a buoy, or tied to a pier. So if your vessel's just out there drifting, you are underway. If you have one fishing line over the side and you're trying to catch flounder off the bottom as you drift by, you are underway, right? And you're a power-driven vessel in that case. So another key point of Rule 3 is some of the differences between inland and international rules. And the first one that comes to mind is in international rules, there's another type of vessel called constrained by draft, CBD. They show a very specific type of signal, and these are vessels that, because of the depth of the vessel in relation to the water around them, are severely restricted in their ability to maneuver, right? So why is it only in international waters? Well, presumably in inland waters, most vessels are constrained by draft, right? But the international rule, as governed internationally, allows for these type of vessels. So there's no such thing as a constrained by draft vessel in inland waters, and that's an important distinction. Another kind of weird question you may see, you won't see a lot of questions about this, but regarding seaplanes and wing-in-ground planes. This video is one about a wing-in-ground aircraft and or wing-in-ground craft. And this is something that uses the ground cushion effect to propel themselves over the water. So generally seaplanes and wing-in-ground craft are required to keep well away from power-driven vessels or any other vessel, but I just wanted to show you a picture of what one looks like. And then lastly, the inland rules have a couple of definitions for what the inland rules comprise of, right? So what does the Western Rivers mean? What do the Great Lakes mean, etc.? So you should read those carefully, and you do need to really memorize most of these rules. The more that you can come out and say them verbatim, is probably better for you as you move forward. So spend a good amount of time on this rule. Go ahead and do that. Pause the video. We'll take the quiz and talk about that in just a second. Okay, so looking at the quiz, the first question, both international and inland, which vessel is underway according to the rules? So if you look at the answers, a vessel engaged in towing, a pilot vessel at anchor, a vessel made fast to a buoy, a vessel which is run aground. Choices B, C, and D are all specific cases that are not underway. That leaves choice A, a vessel engaged in towing, not making way. When they say not making way, that means they're just kind of drifting through the water. They're not necessarily being propelled by their machinery, but they are underway. For the second one, both international and inland, a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver is one which what? Well, if you think restricted in ability to maneuver, you should immediately think the nature of her work. And choice D gets right there. A vessel from the nature of her work which is unable to maneuver as required. So looking at the other ones, choice A, exceptional circumstance, that would be a not under command vessel. Choice B, due to adverse weather conditions, is unable to maneuver, probably a not under command vessel as well. And choice C has lost steering, unable to maneuver, an exceptional circumstance again. So choices A, B, and C are all not under command vessels. For the next one, both international and inland, a vessel is engaged in fishing when what? A, she's using fishing apparatus which restricts her maneuverability, right? So nets, lines, warps, trawls, that kind of stuff. Choices B, C, and D are incorrect. Any fishing gear on board, it has to restrict maneuverability. Gear extending more than 100 meters from the vessel, potentially, but it doesn't say that it restricts the maneuverability. And then finally, any gear other than lines, that's not correct. So a long lining vessel, one that's going for tuna, could be restricted in its ability to maneuver by that line and therefore engaged in fishing. But specifically, choice A is correct there. For the next one, international and inland, a vessel being propelled by both sail and engines is a power-driven vessel. Everybody should know that. A lot of sailboaters don't understand that, and that's to their detriment, but she's a power-driven vessel. Both international and inland, according to the navigation rules, all of the following are engaged in fishing except what? Well, trolling was a specific case. A vessel trolling is one that may be fishing, but it's not a vessel engaged in fishing, because if you are a vessel engaged in fishing, you have severe restricted ability to maneuver because of the gear that you have over to the side. Nets, trawls, dredges, those kind of things severely restrict your maneuverability. Okay, for the next one, both international and inland, the nav rules define a vessel not under command as what? Well, when you think not under command, you should think exceptional circumstance. And choice D, once again, talks about an exceptional circumstance unable to maneuver as required by the rules. Looking at the other answers, choice A would be a vessel restricted in its ability to maneuver. Choice B would be moored, anchored in a fairway, maybe just an anchored vessel. Choice C, by taking action contrary to the rules has created a special circumstance. Well, if you think back to Rule 2, special circumstance, I kind of mentioned they throw those words in there a lot. Often they're incorrect, but choice D is the one we're after in this case. Not under command means exceptional circumstance. International only, so pay attention to the fact that it's international only. Which statement is true concerning a vessel constrained by her draft? Well, this is a tricky one because if you read the rules regarding constrained by draft, it does have to be a power-driven vessel, right? So if you look at the other choices, those are all incorrect. Refer back to the rule itself, the constrained by draft definition. Read it carefully, you'll see it must be a power-driven vessel. Both international and inland, according to the rules, which vessel is not restricted in her ability to maneuver? Well, looking at choices A, C, and D, those are all, through the nature of her work, restricted in her ability to maneuver. Whereas choice B, a sailing vessel, you may think that just because the wind is blowing in a certain direction means that she's restricted in her ability to maneuver. That's a tricky part of the rules, right? Oftentimes you can be maybe restricted or limited in your maneuverability, but the definition of restricted ability to maneuver does not include a sailing vessel, right? A sailing vessel has its own definition. You'll see that also with fishing vessels, trawling vessels. They all have their own light configuration, their own definition. So stick with the rules themselves, the definition for restricted inability to maneuver. Finally, inland only, the term Great Lakes, as defined by the inland rules, includes what? Well, you need to read that rule carefully. It includes all the Calumet River, the Chicago, and the St. Lawrence River, so all of the above in this case. So I hope that gives you a sense of the type of questions you could see regarding Rule 3 for definitions. It's an important one. You should spend some time on it.